Hi, everybody. Today's lecture is going to be on operant conditioning. Operant conditioning started with a man by the name of Thorndike. Thorndike was looking at trial and error learning, and what he did was he put cats in a box and he did experiments on them to see if they would like hit walls and how they would get out of this kind of like a corn maze box. And what he found was that the cats would try and they would hit a wall and then they would turn around and they go a different direction and eventually they get themselves out. And he said, we try and we try and we do what's called trials. And then when we have errors that occur, we learn from those errors and we try again until we eventually succeed at a task. This developed into what's called the law and effect. And the law and effect says that any behavior that causes a desirable effect, for an example, getting from point A to point B in your cat box, will tend to be repeated. And any behavior that causes an undesirable effect, such as hitting a wall in the cat box, will tend to be discontinued or not repeated. And that kind of led to operant conditioning. B.F. Skinner made that law of effect the cornerstone for his theory of operant conditioning, basically saying that if we get a desirable consequence, then we will repeat a behavior. And if we don't get a desirable consequence, if we get a punishment for something, then we will tend to lessen our likelihood of doing the behavior again. And he developed this theory based on an operant chamber or a Skinner box, which was a soundproof chamber with a bar for a rat to manipulate the bar to get obtain food through a food dispenser. And what would happen is every time that the rat would push the lever, the food would be dispensed. And eventually, what would happen is the rat would just continually push the lever to continually get food. So, what he determined was that um, the rat had learned that by pushing the lever, he was getting a desirable consequence to his movement, and that because of this, that he would repeatedly push the lever to get that desirable consequence. So he developed this theory called operant conditioning that talks about voluntary responses. So remember with classical conditioning, we were really looking at things that were innate, inborn within us. And then we paired that with a neutral stimulus, and then that developed into a learned experience. With operant conditioning, we're not looking at something that's involuntary. We're looking at something that's voluntary. We make the choice of what behavior we're going to do that creates a consequence. So we associate an antecedent, which is a situation that's occurring, to a behavior to then a consequence to that behavior. So, for an example, if you pull up to a light and the light has just turned red, you have a choice to either stop or to run the light. If you run the light and you get through the light, and you get through it without getting into an accident or getting stopped by a cop, the chances the next time you get up to a red light, you will be more likely to run the light. If you run the light and you get stopped by a cop, then the consequence is negative and the chance it, or the consequence is bad, and the chance is that then you will be less likely in the future to run the light. In operating conditioning, what we're doing is learning in which behavior is strengthened if it's followed by a reinforcement, and then it's weakened if it's followed by a punishment. So, in this little diagram that you see, you have a behavior that occurs and it triggers a consequence. If the consequence is desirable, you're going down with the red arrows, then you're being reinforced. And that means the behavior is going to strengthen. But if the consequence is undesirable or not desirable, it's punishing, and then the behavior is going to weaken, and you'll be less likely for it to occur in the future. So there are some principles of operant conditioning, just like there were principles of classical conditioning. One of the principles is shaping. This is a new one. Shaping is when we reinforce for successive approximations or baby steps towards the desired behavior. For an example, like if we wanted to teach a dolphin to jump through a ring, we're not going to just hold a ring up and hope that the dolphin will jump through. What we will do is every time the dolphin like swims towards the ring, we'll give them a treat. Every time they, get close to the ring, we'll give them a treat. Then eventually if they like get up to the ring and like sniff the ring, we'll give them a treat. And then eventually the hope is that they will jump through the ring, and then we would reinforce that by giving a fish or a treat. Then there is extinction. Extinction is when a response is no longer reinforced. It will eventually disappear over time if it's continually no longer reinforced. So let's say that we're teaching Johnny how to sit in his seat in class, and every time Johnny sits down, we give him a reinforcer of a sticker on a chart. And let's say we stop giving him stickers, then what could happen over time is that behavior could start to, him getting out of his seat could start to pop up again because he's no longer being reinforced for the correct quote quote behavior of sitting in his seat. Spontaneous recovery is the sudden reappearance of a behavior after a period of when it's been extinguished. This is just like it is with classical conditioning. All of a sudden we've stopped the sticker chart with Johnny, and he's running around the room and he's not sitting in the seat, and then one day all of a sudden he starts to sit in his seat again. Normally the behavior will spontaneously be recovered and then it will extinguish again if we don't reinforce it again. Generalization is when two similar reinforcers give the same response. This would be like giving, M&Ms or Reese's Pieces. Then they both give that same response. Um, or like the reward system at McDonald's and the reward system at Chick-fil-A, they give the same response. And then discrimination is the ability to distinguish between two similar reinforcements or situations. This is like if somebody acts a certain way at grandma's house and they act a different way at their parents' house. So, what are reinforcers? Reinforcers are anything that increases the likelihood that the behavior will occur. Okay, there are primary reinforcers, which are needs. These are things that are innate within us, like water, food, sleep, termination of pain, those basic needs we talked about with Maslow. These satisfy our biological needs, so they are things that we will really work for in order to have them met. And then there's secondary reinforcers. These are things that we want. So these are learned reinforcers, things like praise or high grades or gifts, things that we don't necessarily need, but they feel good when we get them. And this chart really shows the difference between the different types of reinforcement and punishment. So anything that's positive is where we apply something or we add something. Anything that's negative is where we subtract something or we remove something. If it's a reinforcement, it increases the likelihood of a behavior occurring again. If it's a punishment, it decreases the likelihood. So positive reinforcement is when we add something good. So this is like you do hard on a project, you work hard on a project, you get an A. Okay. It's two positives. You're adding something good because they did something good, so they're getting something good. Negative reinforcement is two negatives, basically. It's a double negative. It's taking away or subtracting something that's bad. And because you're taking away something that's bad, it actually increases the likelihood of it occurring again. So this example of this would be I take aspirin because my head hurts. The next time that my head hurts, I'll take aspirin again because it took away my headache the last time. Positive punishment is adding something bad. So punishment, of course, decreases the likelihood of the behavior occurring. Positive punishment would be adding something bad. So this would be like spankings, adding chores, adding extra homework. And then negative punishment is subtracting something good. So this would be like taking away free time, like timeouts. This would be like grounding, taking away a video game, taking away a toy. So, again, when we talk about reinforcement, we're talking about increasing the likelihood of a behavior occurring again. When we talk about that positive reinforcement, we're talking about strengthening a response by presenting a positive stimulus to the behavior. When we talk about negative reinforcement, we're talking about increasing the likelihood of a behavior by taking away something that's bad or aversive. So it's that double negative, which equals a positive. So my sink is dripping, so I get up and I fix the faucet. It stops the dripping. So the next time that I hear my sink dripping, I'll be more likely to get up and fix the faucet. Okay. We are going to stop here for the first lecture of operant conditioning. We'll move on to schedules of reinforcement in the second one. Have a great day, guys.